Glad you're able to join us in Sunday school this morning. What do you think? I gotta tighten this up. It's gonna drive me kooky here. There we go. What do you think is the most disgusting smell? What would you say would be the most disgusting smell? Something you can maybe even get on your hands. What would be that worst smell? Martha?
I'm a nurse, you don't want
Okay. Your hand's up. Your hand is up, Laura.
tuna fish.
What's that?
Canned tuna fish.
Canned tuna fish. All right. Well, I can see where some people like. I know some people don't like the smell of canned sardines. That can be a potent smell. My wife, believe it or not, cannot smell a skunk. We can drive down the road and somebody's just run over a skunk and I'm gagging and then, what's wrong with you? And she cannot smell a skunk, but her worst smell is dirty socks. Okay, you can't smell a skunk, but you can smell dirty socks. What I don't like getting on my hands is diesel fuel. Anybody got diesel fuel on their hands before? It's there for days. You just can't. You wash your hands and scrub your hands, and it just doesn't come off. So when I fill up I drive a school bus. So when I'm driving my bus and I have to fill it up, I put gloves on first so I don't get anything on my hand. Otherwise, you go to eat a sandwich and it smells like a bus. While you're eating a sandwich or something like that. So, but a friend of mine I went to school with, and he owned a little business in Brantford. I'm not sure if he still owns it. I think he sold it, although his name's still on the thing there. He had his brother-in-law working for him at one time. And he was giving his brother-in-law a chance, and he knew that his brother-in-law was stealing from him. And he didn't want to come right out and accuse him of stealing from him unless he could kind of catch him in the act. So what he did was he let him see where he took the money out of the till and he rolled it up like a bundle of bills and put it back behind something way underneath the counter, and there's kind of some boxes there, and you can't really see what you're doing, but you reach down and you put it down there. And he let him see him do this. But he also put a dish of this dye back there. All right? And it's very much similar to, I'm sure you've seen TV shows where when somebody robs a bank and they open it up and there's a dye pack in there and it explodes and it ruins all the money. All right? I think he's kind of got the idea from that, because when he reached back there and he got that stuff on his hands, you can't get that off your hands. It takes days of scrubbing. And he saw that the money was gone, and his brother-in-law, for some reason or other, was sick that next day and couldn't come in. And so he went over there, and his hands were raw from trying to scrub this dye off of his hands, and he couldn't do it. All right? So then he was able to, you're fired, buddy. I've given you all kinds of chances. But Pilate tried to wash his hands to symbolically get rid of the responsibility that he had of what he was doing to Jesus. And he got in front of all the people and he washed his hands and said, I'm innocent of this man's blood. All right? But did it really work? Was he still guilty? We're going to look at him today. Who was Pilate? Can anybody tell me, what do you know about Pilate? Did a little digging on him, so I might be able to fill in some blanks here, but what do you know about Pilate? He didn't fly an airplane. What do you know about Pilate? Linda?
Isn't he a part of the government?
He was part of the Roman government. He was what they call a procurator, and I had to look that up because I've always said it wrong. I always said it was procurator, but that's not it. It's procurator. I'm probably still not saying it right. But anyway, he was the fifth one that had been put in charge. When the Romans took over Palestine, they would put these guys in to come in and govern while they were there, and he was actually the fifth one. All right, and he was there from the year AD 26 until the AD 36, and Jesus died around AD 30. All right, which we can kind of figure out that Jesus was then not born right at year 0. It was probably more like 3 or 4 BC when Jesus was born, all right? But he died around AD 30. Historians tell us, because there's some information in the Bible about it, but there's also some historians like Josephus. Now, what Josephus writes is not inspired by God, okay, and there could be errors in some of the stuff that he writes. But looking at some of these historians and looking around, we can learn some other things about Pilate, and some of it, we can see where it lines up with Scripture. But he was a guy that would kind of like to antagonize the Jews. When he first came in there to be a procurator, governor, okay, as he was governing Palestine, the area that he was over was Judea and Samaria and Idumea, okay. But that area that he was in, when he first came in, he put up these standards around in the holy city of Jerusalem, which these Roman standards, and he also put these shields in the temple that had the names and like drawings of some sort, some kind of a picture of the Roman deities, all right, just to get the Jews up really mad at him, okay? And that was the kind of guy that he was, although we don't see that necessarily in this part here, but when he first came, that's what he was doing, just basically showing his muscle as to I'm in charge, and this is what we're going to do, all right? And as time progressed, he did some other things, to try to appease the people, realizing that necessarily wasn't quite working. But he did some other crazy things, and we find that he at one time he even appropriated funds from the temple taxes in order to build an aqueduct. And I don't know if you've ever seen what an aqueduct is, but when we were over in Israel, we saw this one aqueduct, had nothing to do with Pilate. But it's a thing where they would just try to bring water in to the city. And this thing that I got to sit on it, and it went for miles and miles and miles. And how these guys were able to engineer this without water pumps, and where they're going miles and miles and miles of making this water go downhill all the way, up on these big arches that they used slave labor to build, and so forth, that they would bring the water in. Well, he like I say, at one point he expropriated some money from the temple to build these things, all right? According to Josephus, his career ended about 6 years after he condemned Jesus. He had sent some people into Samaria and killed a bunch of innocent people when there was a small little religious uprising that was happening there. And he just kind of disappears off the scene. And then there's some traditions, which you really can't put a lot of faith in these traditions of things that happen. Some people think that, he got so depressed after a while that he killed himself and so forth. There's really no verification on that. That's just kind of like I say, a tradition that happens there. But here's Pilate, all right? And our account that we're going to look at picks up in Jerusalem, and normally Pilate did not live in Jerusalem. Normally Pilate lived in Caesarea, but he was in Jerusalem at this time because it was the Passover time. And I've mentioned before that during the Passover, the population in Jerusalem would triple, all right, because people were coming from all over to do the Passover meal in the city limits of Jerusalem, all right? And there would be so many people that were there that the Romans, who were ruling at the time, we know that they were doing that, they would bring in extra guards and so forth to make sure that there was no uprising that was going to happen during this time. And Pilate was there to oversee that. So he was in Jerusalem, although he's not normally there, okay? But that is why he was there at that time. We see that if you've been following along with our Bible studies that we've been doing in Sunday school, we know that just to kind of rewind here a little bit, so where you are, we know that the soldiers had come, and the high priests had, and their cohorts that they had together had come and captured Jesus. If you can call it capturing him, he was willingly giving himself there, but where was it where they took Jesus and they bound him? I want you to talk to me here. Where was it? Where did they bind Jesus? Where was he when they did that and they took him captive? It was in the garden. You're absolutely correct. Do you remember the name of the garden? Pardon me? He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, all right? And they came in broad daylight to do this, correct? No, they did not do it in the broad daylight. They came in the darkness of night, all right, to slide in there. And even Jesus said to them, well, I've been teaching in the temple openly in the daytime. Why didn't you come then? All right, but they came and they took him, captured him at night, and we know that they took him. And I mentioned last Sunday that there's basically 6 stages of, if you can call it a trial. You really can't call it a trial. They were railroading Jesus, would probably be a better term to use. And there were 6 stages that they did overnight. Now, 2 of them happened during the night, and then 2 of them happened bright and early in the morning as they were, and then everything happened. It was all done by like 9 o'clock in the morning. All right, but they came. Remember, they first of all took him to whom? Do you remember who they took him through first? What was his name? Martha? Annas. And what was Annas? What was he? You're correct. I'm sorry? He was the high priest, the high priest's father-in-law, and he was the previous high priest. Okay? And so he went to Annas first, and then he went to whom? Went to whom after that? Deborah? Caiaphas, who was the present high priest, all right, and the son-in-law of Annas. There we go. We got it all figured out, all right. And we know that what they did there, they mocked Jesus. They brought in all kinds of false witnesses against Jesus to try to trap him and to try to do other things to convict him. Because what was their ultimate goal? What was their ultimate goal? Linda? To kill him. They wanted to kill Jesus. All right? Here's these priests. They want to kill Jesus. Really seems kind of counterproductive, does it not? So I'd really like you to take your Bibles this morning. All right? And I did a lot of rereading of all these things and tried to put some things in order for you. So if you've got like a piece of paper, so you can rip it up into 3 little spots, so you can flip from, there's basically 4 sections that we're going to look at, all right? Essentially 3. If you can kind of bookmark them as we go, so we can flip you back and forth, because there's a lot of, this is one of those classic times when it's really important that we read all 4 accounts, because they all contain something a little bit different. Not contradicting themselves, but an additional detail would be the better way to put it, that aren't necessarily all, well, they aren't. They're not all in one book, all right? And in order to pick up all these details, we need to look at the different passages. So take your Bibles and come with me to Matthew chapter 22. Okay? No, it's chapter 27, I'm sure of it. We do look at Matthew 22. Yes, it's Matthew 27, Mark chapter 15, Luke chapter 23, and John chapter 18 and 19, okay? So if you can kind of just stick a finger, if you got 4 fingers to stick in your Bible there, we're going to look at that, all right? So Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23, and John 18. And we'll get to John 19, okay? We're going to start in Mark chapter 15, because that's where we have been studying. And we're going to read through the first 15 verses. That's the area that that time frame that we're going to cover this morning and see some things here. So come with me. Keep your fingers or a piece of paper. Or, in my Bible, it's really kind of lucky. I have 3 ribbons in my Bible, so I can kind of flip around to one spot or another. But in Mark chapter 15, that's where we're going to go. Verses 1 down to verse 15, it says, "And straightway in the morning," this is after Caiaphas, all right? After they met with Caiaphas and Jesus had been held captive there, they called together a meeting of the council, all right, and the Sanhedrin and whomever they wanted to have at this meeting. They're all there, okay? It says the whole council, and they had, after they'd done their fake little trial things there, and Caiaphas had finally just point blank asked him, "Are you the Messiah?" Basically, that wasn't the words he used, but are you the blessed, I believe it was. And Jesus says, "I am." And then there was some other things that happened. We looked at those last week. And then here we have, "And straightway in the morning." There's a reason why it's in the morning, all right? They can't, all the stuff that they've been doing during the night is really not legal, all right? They have to do this, that the actual sentencing and so forth has to be done in the daytime, all right? So here they are, first thing in the morning, all right? And straightway in the morning, I'll get moving along here. We've got through 5 words already here. The chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Art thou the king of the Jews?" And he answered and said unto him, "Thou sayest it." And the chief priests accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, "Answerest thou nothing? Behold, how many things they witness against thee." But Jesus yet answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. Now at the feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made an insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answered them, saying, "Will ye that I release unto you the king of the Jews?" For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy, not for the reasons that they were accusing him of. He could tell, all right? But the chief priests moved the people that he should rather release Barabbas unto them. And Pilate answered and said again unto them, "What will ye then that I shall do unto him whom ye call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." Then Pilate said unto them, "Why? What evil hath he done?" And they cried out the more exceedingly, "Crucify him." And so Pilate, willing to content the people, there's his reasoning. So Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them and delivered Jesus when he had scourged him to be crucified. They led Jesus in the morning. They had their little meeting. It was a pretty big meeting, actually, but then they took him, we see there in verse 1, and they bound him, and they took him to Pilate, all right? Now, it's important that we look at something else here. So if you got keep your fingers in Mark, okay? But let's go over to John chapter 18, okay? John chapter 18. Excuse me, verse number 28. It says, "Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover." You know what I say to this? What a joke. Here are these men, these high priests, these Sadducees and Pharisees and elders and scribes, and here they are, they want to kill Jesus, and they're doing, this is God's son, all right? They have done all kinds of cruel things to him already, and they don't want to defile themselves by stepping on Gentile ground, and then they can't eat the Passover. What has the Passover become? It is just a ritual. I mean, it's a commanded thing, but up until this point, it was a commanded thing that God wanted them to do, but he wanted to do them with the right heart. But these guys have got this down to a ritual. You know what? It doesn't matter what our hearts are. We want to kill the Son of God, but you know what? I won't step on Gentile ground. like I said, the only thing I can say is what a joke these guys are. You know, they're doing this, and here's their motivation. So when you need to kind of picture this now as Pilate, there's a bit of walking back and forth where Jesus is taken into the judgment hall, and Pilate comes out to them, all right? It says there that, and they themselves went into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. And Pilate would come back and forth, and he would talk with Jesus, all right? It's kind of important that we kind of get the picture there. We don't get that in Mark, that we just assume that he's there. But these guys follow him around, constantly accusing, constantly saying they're doing their best to convince the powers that be, because the Romans had taken away their right to capital punishment. Now you can see that if you look at it and you can see where they didn't have the right to do capital punishment, okay? But if they did do it, it was almost like they looked away a little bit. Okay, but here they wanted to make this legal. And I'm saying that for this reason. We find out just a little while later where they take Stephen in there. And what do they do to Stephen? They stone him to death. Okay? And there is no repercussions from the Roman government that happens to them for stoning him to death. All right? But we got to realize something else here. Jesus cannot be killed by stoning him to death. Why not? Why can't Jesus die by stoning him to death? Deborah?
Prophecies say not a bone would be broken.
There's one prophecy, you're absolutely correct. I didn't even think of that one, but you were dead on the money there, okay? He had to die on a tree. He had to die by being crucified to become that curse of sin for us. That was what was prophesied, okay? He's not going to die by being stoned. They tried to stone him a couple other times, you remember? And you know, it's cool when you read the Bible, and sometimes we just kind of skim over stuff, and we can skim right over a miracle. They're coming to get Jesus. The one time they're going to kill Jesus, and what did he do? He walked through the midst of them. Excuse me. That just cracks me right up. Oh, get out of the way! You know, we're trying to get to Jesus. Push him out of the way. You know, and Jesus he walks through the midst of them, and escapes. If you can call it an escape, okay, it's Jesus' power. But you know, we sometimes we read through the Bible and we skip over. Look what God did right here. All right. No man taketh my life from me, but I lay it down of myself, and I will take it up again. And it's not an exact quote, but that is the gist of what he says there. Okay. So he can't be stoned. So they come there, okay, and they bring all these accusations to him. Now take your Bibles and go to Luke chapter 23, okay? Luke chapter 23. Shouldn't take you long to get there because you put a bookmarker in there, right? And verse number 2, it says, "And they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King.'" Let me ask you, is there any truth in that statement? Louise says no. How do you know, Louise?
Jesus asked them to go get a fish and get the coin out, give it to Caesar, and then give it to God. What is God?
Okay, you kind of put two stories together there, but they're both got to do with paying the taxes. You are correct. Okay, that's pretty cool. There is an amazing miracle right there that Louise brought up. Is when Peter and him had to pay taxes, and Jesus says, "Go down, cast a hook." So he didn't just fish with nets; he had a fishing pole. All right, and pull out a fish, and the fish that you catch is going to have a coin in his mouth. Is that possible to set up? That is impossible to set up unless you're God, and then you say, okay, you grab that coin and you bite that hook, and that's just one of the really cool miracles that it stands out as bigger to me than some of the other miracles. They're all miracles, and they're all amazing that God could do. But to go pick up a fish, I've heard of people catching fish and there's another lure hooked in their mouth. I've never heard of anybody other than Peter who caught one with money in his mouth. All right. But that was the one instance. But there's another instance, okay, when they were accusing him, and it's in Matthew chapter 22, okay? Matthew chapter 22, in verse number 21, this is what Jesus says. "And they say unto him, they say unto him, Caesar's," he says, you know, whose inscription is on this coin. "Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." And that's the verse that Louise referenced there as well. Is Jesus saying, pay your tribute to me? No, he's saying pay your tribute, pay what belongs to Caesar, unto Caesar. All right? It's exactly the opposite of what they are trying to accuse him, but they're just grasping at straws. Remember who they're talking to here. They're talking to this governor, all right? And we're going to try to make Jesus look like he is causing treason, all right? And saying that he's the king and Caesar's not the king, and you've got to pay your money to me. And there's absolutely no truth whatsoever in that statement. What is true is how the Bible puts what they said, okay? Another little key thing to remember when we're looking at the scripture. When someone is quoted, just because the quote is there, doesn't mean the quote is true, all right? The quote is recorded as it is true. That's exactly what that person said, but is that person saying the truth? Like when Satan was in the Garden of Eden, and you know, he quotes what God said to Eve. That's not what God said to Eve, okay? But his quote is correct, okay? And it's important that we kind of look at that and not just assume automatically that because of what they're saying here makes it true. When they called Jesus a glutton and a winebibber, that does not mean that Jesus was a glutton and a winebibber. It means that's what they accused him of, but they were wrong, okay? Very important to remember that, okay? So we find here that these accusations are being made to Pilate, all right? And we're going to show you what Pilate is doing here in Luke chapter 23 and verse number 4. All right? This is Pilate's first admission that Jesus is without fault. Okay? And in Luke 23 verse 4 it says, "Then Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, he says, I find no fault in this man." You know, and as he did this, they got more and more upset. You know, their plan isn't working here. They're not allowed to kill him, but they want to get Pilate to convict Jesus and to have Pilate kill him. And we see there in Luke 23 and verse 5, and it says, "And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place." And they're vehement about this. Actually, it says that in one of the other verses that they got vehement about how they were attacking Jesus, all right? But when they said this, when they said that he started from Galilee and he comes to this place, Pilate goes, "Oh, beautiful. I don't have to take the blame for this. Because you know who's in charge of Galilee? Herod. That's out of my jurisdiction. I'm Judea, Samaria, Idumea. Herod's got Galilee. Tell you what I'll do. We'll send him to Herod." All right? And they take him and they bring him to Herod. Here's his loophole. So in Luke chapter 23 and verse 8, you're still in Luke, it says, "And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him for a long season." Oh, Herod wants to get saved, right? Nope. He wants to see a miracle. "Because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him." Herod had heard lots about Jesus. Pilate had heard lots about Jesus. All right? This was not something that was just a quiet thing that was happening. People heard about Jesus. They knew about Jesus. Thousands of people knew what Jesus was doing. I mean, he fed 5,000 people all at once. Plus the women, plus the children. Might have been 10,000 people there. From some little guy's lunch. 10,000 people got to see Jesus. Just that's in the one time. Then there's another one where he fed 4,000 people, plus others. All right? Jesus said nothing while he was in front of Herod. So Herod mocked Jesus. He didn't get what he wanted. And Herod's soldiers mocked Jesus. It says it was Herod's soldiers that put the purple robe upon Jesus. Actually, it says that it was a gorgeous robe at this point. But they put this robe on Jesus. And we're going to look at that a little bit more next week. But they mocked who he was. All right? And they sent him back. Verse 10 is where it says that the priests were there and they were trying to, they followed him to Herod. And in verse 10 there, it says that they could see that they were losing and they were vehement. They vehemently were accusing Jesus, all right? They kind of lost with Pilate, and then they brought him to Herod, and Herod says, well, I don't see anything wrong with him. But at the same time, Herod mocked him, his soldiers mocked him, and they sent him back to Pilate. So here's stage 6. We see that the first stage is Annas, then it goes to Caiaphas, then there's the whole council that gets together. And then the next 3 is it goes to Pilate, then he goes to Herod, then he comes back to Pilate again. All right? And as he comes back to Pilate, the only thing that Pilate accomplished here, rather than trying to pass off the buck and not be able to condemn Jesus himself, the only thing that was accomplished was there was a rift between Herod and Pilate before this. And I believe it's in Luke chapter 13, I can't remember, I didn't write the verse down, where something had happened and Pilate had done something and some people had died and so forth, and they were at one another. And it tells us actually there in Luke chapter 23 and verse 12, And it says, and the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. So basically that's all that he managed to accomplish, was Herod was now his friend. He had kind of puffed up Herod's pride in that he's consulting with Herod. You know, well, what's your advice that I do with this guy? So he's kind of puffing him up, and it mended their relationship, but it still didn't do anything for what is Pilate going to do with Jesus. But we find that we've already seen the first admission where Pilate said, I find no fault in this man. Here's his second admission, still in Luke chapter 23, verse number 15. He comes before the people again. He says, no, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. He's done nothing wrong. Here's my question for you. If he's done nothing wrong, why is he going to get chastised? Why? Why is he going to beat him when he's done nothing? Well, you're an innocent man. Take your shirt off. We're going to peel all the meat off your back. Deborah? You ever play bingo? You just won. Bingo. Okay? I thought that was for really, really old people, bingo. Anyway, no. What's that? Oh, okay. All right. But at any rate, that's what he wanted to do. He's going to appease her. Go, well, you know what? I'll whip him and I'll beat him, and then, you know, that should be good enough. What did the crowd say? No. That's not good enough. We need to kill him. All right? He found Jesus was innocent himself. He figured that out. He sends him to Herod, who finds that Jesus is innocent. He tries to appease them with this beating, and then he tries one more thing. Well, if that doesn't work, you know, we have a custom that he's done before where I can release one prisoner. Now, he picks the most notorious one that's there. The Bible calls him notorious, okay? In John chapter 18 and verse 40, it calls Barabbas a robber. In Matthew 27 and verse 16, it calls him a notorious prisoner. What's notorious? When I give you the word notorious prisoner, who comes to mind for you? That's the one that comes to mind for me. Paul Bernardo. Or, let's go to BC. Who comes to mind for you there? You can't remember his name? Starts with C, and his last name ends with Lifford. Clifford Olson, okay? That's what comes to mind, okay? These guys, Paul Bernardo, Clifford Olson, he is a notorious prisoner. This is the guy. This is the guy, all right? In Luke 23, verse 19, calls him a murderer. He's a robber, he's a murderer, he's a notorious prisoner. Surely, if you have your pick, all right, are we going to release the man who fed 5,000 of you and healed your blind, healed your deaf, healed your lame, or are we going to let Paul Bernardo back out on the streets? That's his theory. You know what they said? Give us Paul Bernardo. So Bernardo, Barabbas, you know, it's kind of close to the same thing there, but that's what they did, okay? So he fails in this other one, all right? Who would want this guy back out on the street? So here's Pilate. He's wrestling with these things. Something else happens. We haven't looked at Matthew yet. Matthew 27. Matthew 27. Starting in verse 23. And the governor said, why, what evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water. I'm starting in the wrong spot here, sorry. 27 verse 17. Back up. We're jumping too far ahead in our account here. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said unto them, whom will ye that I release unto you? Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. And when he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. Pilate has seen over and over again that Jesus is innocent, that these men want to deliver him because they are envious of him, And even his wife says, I've suffered many things in a dream. Have nothing to do with him. Have nothing to do with him. But this crowd is convinced by the chief priests and the elders and the scribes, and they're going around. I don't know what they said to these people. What governs what a mob does? Who knows? But they got the people incited that they would have Barabbas released. You ever wonder what happened to Barabbas? It doesn't tell us anymore. But you got to wonder, did anything sink in, or is that man's heart just so hardened? We can see how evil of a criminal he was. Probably not. Probably didn't do anything to him at all, understanding that what Jesus was dying in his place. It didn't make any difference to these people, what they had seen. All right. So probably didn't, but you kind of wonder what happens to some of these people that are just mentioned ever so briefly in the Bible. Whatever happened to them, But they were convinced, all right, that Barabbas was to be the guy. Now look at verse down still in Matthew there in 27, verse 23. And it says, and the governor said, why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. Ye see to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Again at verse 24, when Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. I've got nothing to do with this just person. He has done nothing wrong. So he's going to wash his hands. Let me ask you, was he innocent? Was he innocent? Deborah?
Not really, because he was authority, but it was prophesied that it would be this way.
That's true. We got to be real careful with when we look at the prophecy. We can't say that because something was prophesied, this man had no choice. Okay?
But he was the authority.
He is the authority. Yes. Okay? So he's not innocent. All right? It's like some will look at Judas and say, well, it was prophesied, so Judas really didn't have a choice. That's not how prophecy works. Prophecy works, God knows what's going to happen, so he says this is what's going to happen, but he knows what their free choice is going to be because he's God. But the free choice is still there. Judas did have a choice. What a foolish choice he made. Got those 30 pieces of silver? I don't think he had them for an hour in his hand. I was reading, and I was actually going to ask Pastor what he thought of this, but when I was looking through one of the passages there, when it talks about when Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, I got to thinking, was Judas actually right there with him? We see that Judas was with them. It talks about when it comes into the Garden of Gethsemane, and it says that Judas was with them. I think that they allowed him, and I could be wrong, and this is a little bit of supposition here, okay? But think of this, that Judas was in the council there where he really doesn't belong, but he was with them in the garden. And then when he saw that Jesus was condemned, it's like, was he right there within that council? I don't know. Or he was close enough that he could see what happened right away, and then he realized what he'd done was wrong, which he should have realized it a long time ago. Okay, but it's again, I'm not sure because he's really not supposed to be there. Okay, but at the same time, it says that he was with them in the garden. At any rate, whether he was in the council or near enough to the council to hear or whatever, Judas heard, and that's when he tried to repent, throws that money back down. But it was his choice. Okay, Pilate had a choice. He had all kinds of warnings. He had more warnings than Judas had. He could see that he was just. He took him to Herod. Herod said he was just. He could see that all these accusations were coming were wrong accusations. And then his wife says, please, don't have anything to do with this guy. All right? And there he is, washing his hands. And it's like he's got diesel fuel on his hands because nothing's happening. He is not wiping that guilt off. He can scrub all he wants to. Like my friend's brother-in-law, scrub and scrub and scrub, and that dye is still there. The guilt is still there for Pilate. All right? Pilate knew what was right, but he refused to do anything about it. Isn't that a pretty good definition of the word cowardice? To know what to do is right, but to do nothing about it. He looked for the easy way out, not the right way. Sometimes the right way is the easy way. Sometimes it is obvious and we have enough conviction on something that it's just an automatic. You're walking down the street and you see somebody, reach into their pocket and pull out their keys and a $20 bill falls on the ground. And you went, hold on a minute, sir, and you drop this. And we don't even think about it. It's the right thing to do, right? This year I went to Home Depot and I bought a poinsettia, or poinsettia, however you want to say it, okay? And it was $20 for this poinsettia, and I always go to the self-checkout. It's faster, and and I scan the thing, and it comes up $9 and something. Well, that's not right. I'm looking at it. It's a $20 one. It's the bigger one. They did have little ones for $10, but this was a bigger one. And so I just automatically turned to the. There's a girl that kind of works. And I said, just a minute. I says, come on over here. I says, this is wrong. This is supposed to be $20, but it's only coming up $10. I didn't have to think about that. All right. And she kind of looked at me like, it rang up 10. Like, give me your $10 and run. Okay. Oh no. I said I'm happy to only pay $10 for it. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's right. And then they came in and says, oh no, these things are on sale now. They're just not marked over there. Okay. Thank you. Just want to make sure. And they're kind of looking at me like I got 3 heads. But it's automatic. But some things aren't that easy. Some things aren't that easy, and some things come at a cost. Some things, and as fallible, sinful, weak human beings, sometimes we weigh the cost to do what's right or to not do what's right. There's Pilate. There's Pilate. He knew what to do, what was right. And he was, he put everything on a scale, and he kept trying to shift the balance so that he didn't have to make the choice. I'll let Herod make the choice, or you'll pick Jesus over Barabbas. Surely, who wants Paul Bernardo back out on the street? And he was asking questions like, is this the safe way? Or is this the popular way? Pilate had heard, as I mentioned earlier, Pilate had heard about the miracles that Jesus had done. Remember when Paul was in front of Festus and Agrippa? And he was witnessing to these two guys? And in Acts chapter 26, verse 26, I'll just read the verse for you. It says, for the king knoweth of these things, speaking of the things that Jesus had done, before whom also I speak freely, for I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. What Jesus did was not a secret. Everybody knew about it. Pilate knew all the things that Jesus had done. Well, not all the things. He'd heard of many of the things that Jesus had done. Herod had heard of many of the things that Jesus had done, and he wanted to see him and hoped that Jesus was going to do a little magic show for him. All right? Having a knowledge, but not having the knowledge of the truth as to why Jesus was doing these miracles. But Pilate was more concerned about popular opinion than character. More concerned about popular opinion than character. If we allow someone else to assume the guilt, does that free us up of our responsibility? If we let somebody else take the guilt? No. That's what he was doing. He's washing his hands, and they says, you know what? The guilt be on us and on our children, and you're free. No, that doesn't work. They can say that all they want, but words are cheap. Words are cheap. And someone says, don't worry about this. This is on me. We can do this crooked thing. We can do this dishonest thing, and don't you worry about it. I'll take the blame for this. We have responsibility. We have responsibility before God to do what's right. We have a responsibility, and if we don't, what does that make us? What does that make us? Certainly don't want to be a Pilate. My title for this lesson was A Pilate Pilate without a flight plan. A little pun on the word pilot there, but you know, we serve a great God, but we need to serve him. We need to love him. We need to do things the right way because they're the right way, not because of the easy way, but because it's the right way. Let's have a word of prayer. Precious Father,